The heavy doors of the Galactic Union vessel Taralis opened with a hiss, releasing a faint smell of heated metal and cleaning gas. Inside the docking bay, humans moved in their usual quick, unplanned way, while several alien species watched with curiosity, or in some cases annoyance. Among the arrivals was Ethan Cole, a human mechanic in his early 30s. His jumpsuit had several oil stains, his tool belt clanked with spanners and welding rods, and his face carried the tired but stubborn look of someone who had spent too many nights repairing machines that should have been scrapped years ago. He stepped onto the bright deck, blinking at the polished walls and the organized alien crew. "Fancy ship," he muttered to himself. "Let's hope they don't mind a little mess." Ethan had been transferred here because the Union had decided on an experiment. The project required both human improvisation and alien theory. To make sure there was true collaboration, the Union had gone a step further. The assigned mechanic and engineer would not only work together, but also share living quarters. That was the part Ethan disliked. He valued his space, his tools scattered in his own way, and his habit of working late into the night. Sharing with an alien sounded like a nightmare. He soon met his assigned partner, Kareth, an engineer from the Oral species. Kareth stood tall, with smooth silver-blue skin that shimmered faintly in the light. His large eyes blinked slowly, and his long fingers held a datapad with exact precision. His uniform was spotless, pressed as if he had just stepped out of a training video. When he looked at Ethan, his expression was calm, but his tone carried a sharp edge. "You are the human mechanic," Kareth said, as if confirming a suspicion. "And you must be my new roommate," Ethan replied with a half-smile, adjusting his tool belt. Kareth tilted his head, clearly not pleased. "The Union believes your skills will balance this mission. I will withhold judgment until I observe." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Well, that makes two of us, pal." The shared quarters, their assigned quarters, were not large. The room had two bunks fixed to opposite walls, a single desk with dual screens, and a storage unit barely large enough for both sets of tools. Ethan tossed his bag onto the lower bunk without hesitation. "Home sweet home," he said. Kareth placed his belongings neatly into the storage unit, arranging tools by size and type with precise motions. He watched Ethan drop his wrenches into a pile. "That is disorder," Kareth said. "You will lose efficiency," Ethan smirked. "I call it organized chaos. I know where everything is, even if it looks like a mess." Kareth folded his hands. Chaos and engineering do not belong in the same sentence. For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. Both realized the same truth. This arrangement was going to be difficult. First assignment, the following day, Ethan and Kareth received their first task. A power conduit had been damaged during a micrometeorite strike. It supplied energy to half the ship's secondary systems. If it failed completely, several decks would lose air circulation. Kareth analyzed the readouts on his datapad, speaking in a calm tone. "We must calculate the safest procedure. If we misalign the conduits by even a fraction, we risk destabilizing the plasma flow. The process will take 6 hours of simulation and approval." Ethan crouched by the conduit, already holding a welding torch. 6 hours? "This thing's leaking now. We've got maybe 30 minutes before the backup systems overload." "You cannot act without certainty," Kareth warned. "And you can't sit here waiting while people start gasping for air," Ethan shot back. The alien engineer frowned, his eyes narrowing. "Humans always rush. That is why your species breaks as much as it builds." Ethan grinned despite the situation. "Maybe, but we also fix things faster than anyone else." Without further argument, Ethan slid under the conduit, sparks flying as he began patching cracks. He rerouted a line with quick hands, pulling from spare cables he carried in his belt. Kareth watched, both horrified and fascinated, as Ethan ignored the risk of burns and improvised connections that had not been in any manual. The ship's lights flickered, then steadied. The warning alarms went silent. Power flow returned to normal. Ethan rolled out from under the conduit, wiping sweat from his forehead. "There, she'll hold." Kareth checked the readouts in disbelief. "Impossible. You bypassed half the stabilizers and yet efficiency is maintained." "Not impossible," Ethan said with a shrug. "Just human." Uneasy respect that evening, back in their quarters, Kareth studied Ethan with quiet curiosity. "You acted without calculation," he said. Yet your repair worked. How? Ethan leaned against his bunk. You folks love your math and theory. Don't get me wrong, it's useful. But sometimes you don't have 6 hours to run numbers. Humans, we cut corners, make it work, and fix the details later. Kareth considered this. Reckless, but effective. Ethan chuckled. That's one way to put it. Kareth then surprised him. He reorganized one of Ethan's tool piles, aligning them neatly. At least keep this in order. If we are to work together, some balance is required. Ethan gave a half smile. Deal, but don't touch my wrench pile. That's sacred ground. Silent realization. As lights dimmed to simulate night, both lay in their bunks, staring at the ceiling. For Ethan, it was strange sharing space with someone so different, an alien who measured every breath. Yet he had to admit, Kareth's precision might have saved them if his quick patch hadn't worked. For Kareth, the thought was harder to accept. A human mechanic, using instinct instead of calculation, had repaired what should have been impossible. Neither spoke the words aloud, but both felt the same quiet thought forming. Maybe this partnership would not only be possible, it might be necessary. The hum of the ship filled the silence. The mechanic and the engineer, opposites in every way, had just taken their first step toward something far greater than either expected. The next morning aboard the Taralis, the announcement chime echoed through the corridors. Crew members hurried to their stations, the low hum of engines mixing with footsteps. Ethan Cole, the human mechanic, rubbed his eyes, yawning as he pulled on his stained jumpsuit. From the opposite bunk, Kareth was already awake, his silver-blue skin reflecting the cabin's soft light. He sat upright with perfect posture, reviewing data on his pad. His tools were polished and neatly aligned beside him. You humans sleep too long, Kareth said without looking up. Ethan groaned, searching for his boots under the bed. And you aliens wake up too early. Balance, my friend, balance. Kareth frowned slightly at the word friend, as if unsure whether Ethan had meant it seriously or as another human joke. Before he could reply, the comm screen lit up. Mechanic Cole, Engineer Kareth, the voice of the captain said, Report to Deck 6, we have a damaged auxiliary core. This is top priority. The assignment when they reached Deck 6. The site made several technicians uneasy. The auxiliary core chamber smelled faintly of burned circuits and sparks flickered from exposed wiring. A protective barrier shimmered in place, holding back dangerous radiation, but it was weakening. A senior officer gestured toward the core. A meteor fragment pierced the outer hull last night. The shield unit failed before the inner plating could seal. If the auxiliary core shuts down, we'll lose power to critical defense systems. The main core can't handle everything alone. Kareth studied the readouts on the wall. If the radiation increases, this deck must be evacuated. We will need precise calculations before entering. Ethan adjusted his tool belt. Or we fix it fast before it gets worse. That shield's not going to last long. The officer gave them both a hard look. You two were assigned for a reason. Figure it out. You've got 30 minutes before we lose containment. Clash of methods inside the safety chamber. The noise of failing systems echoed around them. Red warning lights blinked across consoles and heat pulsed from the cracked conduit. Kareth activated his pad, running complex simulations. His voice was calm but urgent. If we attempt a manual bypass, we risk destabilizing the plasma flow. My calculations suggest a 90% chance of failure. Ethan knelt by the conduit, already pulling out a welding torch. Yeah, but your calculations don't stop the fact that this thing's already breaking down. If we wait, we'll be cooked. Kareth glared at him. Improvisation will endanger us both. Ethan smirked. Welcome to human problem solving. The tension between them was sharp, each believing their method was right. Crew members outside the chamber watched anxiously through the observation window, unsure if the human and the alien could actually work together. Forced cooperation. Then the shield flickered, a sharp crack echoing through the chamber. The radiation barrier weakened visibly, blue light sparking at the edges. They had no choice but to act quickly. Ethan sighed. Fine, you want calculations? Give me numbers I can use right now. Kareth blinked, surprised. You will follow the data? I'll follow it as long as we don't waste time, Ethan said, tapping the conduit. Just tell me where not to weld. Kareth hesitated, then quickly began dictating coordinates and energy tolerances. Ethan moved with speed, adjusting his tools according to Kareth's instructions. His hands were steady, sparks flying as he reinforced weak joints. But when a sudden power surge rattled the chamber, Kareth panicked. Stop! The levels are unstable! Ethan shook his head. Stopping now makes it worse. Trust me. He rerouted the energy manually, using a trick he had learned back on old human freighters, overloading one section briefly to protect the rest. Kareth watched wide-eyed as Ethan's reckless move actually stabilized the readings. You redirected the surge, Kareth whispered. Without any model? Sometimes you don't need a model, Ethan said, tightening the last bolt. You just need to know how machines feel. Together, they sealed the breach. The red alarms dimmed and the radiation levels fell back into the safe zone. The auxiliary core powered up again, humming with steady strength. Aftermath, when they stepped out of the chamber, the watching crew erupted in cheers. The officer clapped both on the shoulder. Good work, both of you. Looks like the human-alien experiment wasn't such a bad idea after all. Ethan grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. Told you we'd manage. Kareth, still processing what he had witnessed, gave a slow nod. Yes, managed. But not by logic alone. Back in quarters that evening, the two sat in their shared quarters. Ethan leaned back on his bunk, tossing a small wrench in the air. Kareth sat at the desk, carefully noting down details of the repair. You're really writing all that down? Ethan asked. Kareth nodded. Your method was unorthodox, but effective. It must be recorded, Ethan laughed. You're saying I'm a case study? Kareth looked up, serious. I am saying your instincts saved this ship, perhaps. Precision and instinct together form a stronger balance. Ethan smirked. So you're admitting humans aren't just chaos? Kareth hesitated, then replied softly, Not entirely. They shared a rare moment of silence that wasn't filled with annoyance. For the first time, Kareth didn't rearrange Ethan's tools. And Ethan didn't tease Kareth about being too stiff. Quiet realizations as lights dimmed for ship's night. Both thought about the day's events. Ethan realized that Kareth's numbers had guided his hands at crucial moments. Without those details, his patch might have failed. Kareth, meanwhile, considered how Ethan had trusted his instincts even when simulations predicted disaster, and somehow it had worked. Perhaps there was something more to human recklessness than he had believed. For now, they still disagreed on much. But beneath the arguments, a seed of respect had taken root. They had survived their first true test together, and deep in the ship's humming corridors, word spread quickly. The strange pair, the human mechanic and the alien engineer, were beginning to form an unlikely team. The Taralis glided silently through the stars, its silver hull reflecting faint light from distant suns. Inside, life carried on with the steady rhythm of shifts, repairs, and duty calls. But among the crew, whispers had begun. The human mechanic and the alien engineer had done the impossible. Ethan Cole didn't think of it that way. For him, fixing the auxiliary core had been another day of holding broken machines together with grit and stubbornness. But when he walked through the corridors now, he noticed more eyes on him. Some were curious, others impressed. Beside him, Kareth moved with his usual composed steps, datapad in hand, head held high. To others, he looked unchanged, as calm and precise as always. Yet Ethan had started to notice small things. How Kareth paused a moment longer before dismissing his reckless ideas, or how he sometimes asked about human methods instead of instantly rejecting them. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but something was changing. A new task a week after the core incident. The two were summoned to the engine bay. The chief officer explained the problem. The warp drive is producing irregular pulses. They're small, but if left unchecked, they could destabilize the whole system on the next jump. Ethan whistled low. That's not just a small problem. That's a blow-up-the-ship kind of problem. Kareth scanned the readings. The harmonics are misaligned. It requires recalibration across multiple nodes. Precision is essential. Then let's get to it, Ethan said, rolling up his sleeves. The warp drive chamber was massive, filled with humming machinery and glowing conduits. Energy pulsed like a heartbeat, too fast in some areas, too slow in others. It was like a song gone out of tune. Ethan listened to the uneven rhythm while Kareth compared numbers on his pad. If we adjust node 17 by 0.06, the flow should normalize, Kareth suggested. Maybe, Ethan replied, crouching near the node. But if we tighten here without balancing the others, the stress will just shift. She'll pop like a kettle, Kareth blinked. Pop like a kettle? Human saying, Ethan said with a grin. Means bad news. Trial and error, they worked side by side, but differently. Kareth calculated angles and energy flow. Ethan listened to the drive, placing his hand on the machinery as if he could feel its pulse. At first, their methods clashed again. Ethan tightened a valve Kareth hadn't finished analyzing. Kareth ran a simulation while Ethan insisted there wasn't time. Their voices grew louder, echoing in the chamber. "You act without understanding the full system," Kareth snapped. "And you wait so long the system falls apart." Ethan shot back. But when a sudden spike rattled the chamber, both instinctively jumped to action together. Ethan rerouted a line while Kareth adjusted calculations in real time, feeding Ethan exact numbers as he worked. Slowly, the pulses evened out. The hum steadied. The warp drive calmed. Ethan stepped back, wiping sweat. "See? Not so bad." Kareth looked at the readings in disbelief. "Our combined method. It succeeded. Neither alone could have balanced it this way." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, realizing the truth of it. Life in quarters back in their quarters. Something had shifted. Ethan no longer dumped all his tools in a pile. Instead, he kept a section of the desk somewhat neat, though he still had a sacred mess corner he refused to let Kareth touch. Kareth, in turn, had started picking up human habits. Once Ethan caught him muttering, "Close enough," after finishing a calibration. Ethan nearly choked laughing. "Did you just say close enough? You, Mr. Perfect Numbers?" Kareth's silver skin darkened slightly in embarrassment. "It is an efficient phrase." Ethan grinned. "Careful. Next thing you know, you'll be drinking coffee and telling bad jokes." But beneath the humor, there was a growing respect. They ate meals at the same time, sometimes discussing technical theory, sometimes talking about their worlds. Ethan spoke of Earth, its messy cities, noisy markets, and the smell of rain on steel. Kareth listened with quiet interest. In return, Kareth described Orcal Prime, where towers of crystal stretched toward the clouds and engineers spent lifetimes perfecting single machines. "You humans rush," Kareth said one evening, "yet you experience so much in your short lives. Orcal engineers sometimes die before their projects finish. I never understood. Until now." Ethan looked thoughtful. "Maybe rushing isn't all bad. Means we make the most of the time we've got." Recognition their teamwork did not go unnoticed. Other engineers began asking for their advice. Some even copied their method. Theory from Kareth's precision, quick fixes from Ethan's instincts. The human-alien pair had become an example, strange but effective. One evening, as they walked the corridors, a younger officer stopped them. "Sir, ma'am," then corrected himself, embarrassed. "Engineer Kareth, Mechanic Cole. The crew's been talking. They say you two saved the ship twice now." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Twice? Feels like 10? Kareth inclined his head politely. "We did what was necessary." As they continued walking, Ethan nudged him. "You notice that? They don't just see us as a human and an alien anymore. They see us as a team." Kareth allowed a faint smile. Strange, but not unpleasant. The test of trust a few days later, another problem arose. This time, it was a malfunction in the ship's navigation array. To repair it, someone had to go outside the hull in a suit. Radiation made the task dangerous. Ethan prepared to go. "I've done hull walks before." "It'll be fine," Kareth stopped him. "The radiation levels are too unstable." "I should go." Ethan frowned. "No offense, partner, but I've patched more hulls than you've had birthdays." Kareth looked directly at him. "And yet you are the one who acts without thought. If something happens to you, this crew loses a vital resource." For the first time, Ethan realized Kareth wasn't just being stubborn. He was worried. Not just about the mission, but about him. Ethan placed a hand on the alien's shoulder. "Tell you what, we go together. You do the calculations, I do the patching. That way neither of us ends up floating home alone." Kareth hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Together, then." Outside the ship drifting in the void, stars around them like endless sparks, Ethan felt the old thrill of spacewalking. Kareth's voice guided him through the comms, calm and precise. "Shift the panel by 2 degrees. Apply the sealant now. Hold, radiation spike incoming." Ethan followed, trusting Kareth's words. For once he didn't argue, and Kareth for once didn't second-guess Ethan's movements. They worked as one, sealing the damage quickly before the next surge hit. When they re-entered the airlock safe, Kareth finally said softly, "Perhaps this partnership was not a mistake." Ethan grinned, tugging off his helmet. Best compliment I've had all week. Quiet bond that night in their quarters, they shared a rare silence. Not the tense silence of the first days, but a peaceful one. Kareth sipped water slowly while Ethan leaned back, arms behind his head. You know, Ethan said, when this whole thing started, I figured we'd tear each other apart before fixing anything. Kareth nodded. I believe the same, yet now, I find your presence less disruptive than expected. Ethan laughed. Careful. That almost sounds like you're saying you don't mind me. Kareth gave a small, almost unnoticeable smile. Perhaps. The hum of the ship surrounded them, steady and calm. Two beings from different worlds, once unwilling roommates, now found themselves not just partners, but something closer, something fragile, but real. A bond was forming, and somewhere deep inside both of them, though neither spoke it aloud, was the same realization. Together, they were stronger than either had ever imagined. The stars looked calm outside the Taralis. The ship glided on a steady course, its engines humming like a heartbeat. Inside, the crew carried out their routines, unaware that danger was already moving toward them. It started with a faint tremor. Ethan Cole was in the engine bay, tightening a valve, when the deck shivered beneath his boots. He frowned, glancing at the glowing panels. That didn't sound like a normal vibration, he muttered. Kareth, standing nearby with his datapad, immediately checked the ship's sensors. His silver-blue skin seemed to pale slightly. It was not. Unknown objects approaching at high velocity. Moments later, the alarm sirens blared. Red lights flashed along the corridors, and the captain's voice rang out through the intercom. Enemy contact. All stations to alert status. Unknown vessels attacking. Ethan and Kareth exchanged a quick look. The ship wasn't built for war, it was a research vessel. If the attackers broke through the shields, they'd all be lost. The first strike, the first hit came like a hammer. The Taralis rocked violently as plasma fire tore across the hull. Sparks rained from the ceiling, and the smell of burned circuits filled the air. Shields are failing, Kareth said urgently, scanning the data. At this rate, they will collapse within minutes. Ethan grabbed his toolkit, already moving toward the nearest junction. Then we better keep this ship alive long enough to get out of here. Another blast shook the vessel. Crew members shouted, running to damaged stations. Ethan and Kareth pushed through the chaos together. When they reached the control deck, the captain pointed at them. Auxiliary systems are down. We need life support stable or we lose half the crew to vacuum exposure. Fix it. Into the damage, the life support core was in worse shape than Ethan had imagined. Pipes hissed steam, wires sparked, and the main stabilizer was half melted. The room pulsed with heat and smoke. Kareth covered his mouth, scanning quickly. The damage is too great. Standard procedure is evacuation of this section. Ethan shook his head, already pulling out a welding rod. Evacuate and we lose the core. Lose the core and everyone suffocates. No way I'm letting that happen. Kareth stared at him, then finally gave a short nod. Then we must improvise. Together. Ethan grinned despite the chaos. Now you're speaking my language. The struggle for the next 20 minutes, the two worked like parts of a single machine. Kareth read numbers and flow rates off his pad, calculating where stress was highest. Ethan crawled through smoke and fire, sealing leaks and patching holes with quick precision. Shift the valve 3 degrees left, Kareth called. On it! Ethan shouted back, sparks spraying across his face as he turned the wrench. A sudden explosion rocked the room, sending them both sprawling. Ethan coughed, pulling himself up. We're running out of time. Kareth's eyes flicked across the readings. If the stabilizer fails, this deck is lost. You cannot repair it fast enough. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then we don't repair it, we replace it. With what? Kareth asked. Ethan's eyes darted to a smaller backup generator on the wall. That. It's not designed for this load, but if we reroute everything through it, maybe it'll hold. Kareth's expression was sharp. That is madness. Ethan smirked through the sweat. Yeah, but it's human madness. Trust in the middle of fire. Kareth hesitated only a moment before nodding. Very well. I will guide the rerouting. You handle the connections. Together they moved, Kareth's fingers flying across the datapad as he recalibrated systems. Ethan ripped cables free and jammed them into new ports, sparks exploding around him. The ship rocked again as another blast hit. A support beam crashed down, narrowly missing Kareth. Ethan grabbed the alien's arm, pulling him clear. Careful, partner, Ethan yelled. Kareth blinked at him, shaken, then managed a small nod. Your instinct just saved me. The final push, the backup generator whined as Ethan made the final connection.
Hit it, Gareth!
Kareth pressed the activation sequence. For a terrifying moment, the lights flickered, systems shuddered. Then steadied. Life support came back online, humming with fresh strength. The air cleared, fans spinning as oxygen levels normalized. Ethan collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. Told you it'd work. Kareth checked the readings, his voice quiet with awe. Impossible. Yet it works. Again. Before they could rest, the captain's voice cut in. Enemy ships disengaging. They've withdrawn. Damage is heavy, but we've survived. Cheers erupted across the intercom. The Taralis had lived through the storm. Recognition later, as the fires were put out and the wounded treated. Ethan and Kareth stood before the captain. You two saved this ship, the captain said firmly. Without your combined methods, life support would have failed. You've proven what the Union was hoping for, that humans and aliens can be more than partners. You can be stronger together. Ethan scratched the back of his neck. Just doing our jobs, Captain. Kareth, however, bowed his head slightly. It was more than that. It was trust. The captain gave them both a rare smile. Rest while you can. The Taralis still has far to travel. In the quarters that night, in their shared quarters, silence lingered. Not the heavy silence of strangers, nor the tense silence of rivals, but the quiet of two who had stood together in fire and survived. Ethan leaned back on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. You know, if someone had told me a few months ago I'd be sharing a room with an alien and saving ships with him, I'd have laughed in their face. Kareth, seated at the desk, folded his long fingers together. If someone had told me I would respect a human mechanic's instincts, I would have dismissed it as fantasy. They looked at each other, and for the first time both smiled openly. Ethan reached over and tapped the edge of the desk. Guess we make a pretty good team, huh? Kareth inclined his head. Not guess. No. The ship hummed steadily around them, carrying them deeper into the unknown. And for the first time, Ethan and Kareth both felt the same truth. Their partnership wasn't just survival anymore. It was something stronger, something unbreakable. The Taralis drifted quietly after the battle. Repairs were underway, though scars of the fight remained. Melted metal along corridors, patched leaks in the hull, and tired faces of a crew that had almost lost everything. Ethan Cole sat cross-legged on the floor of the engine bay, a wrench in one hand and a cloth in the other. He wiped sweat from his brow and glanced at Kareth, who was recalibrating a stabilizer with slow precision. It had been only hours since they had fought side by side to save life support, but it already felt like years had passed. Something between them had shifted, something unspoken but solid. You ever think, Ethan asked quietly, that maybe the universe has a sense of humor? A human mechanic and an alien engineer, worlds apart, stuck in the same quarters, saving a ship together. Kareth's silver-blue eyes lifted from his datapad. Not humor, intention. There are lessons only hardship can teach, Ethan smirked. Spoken like a philosopher. Didn't think you had that in you. Before Kareth could reply, the captain's voice cut through the comms. All senior crew to the briefing room now. The threat returns. The briefing room was filled with tense faces. Holoscreens glowed with images of the unknown ships that had attacked them. Sleek, dark vessels shaped like daggers moving with deadly grace. They didn't come here by chance, the captain said grimly. We've confirmed they belong to the Vraxis Dominion, a hostile empire expanding into neutral space. They tested us today and they'll return with more. A low murmur ran through the crew. Some were afraid, others angry. Ethan folded his arms, his mechanic's jumpsuit still streaked with grease. So what's the plan? He asked. The captain's eyes moved across the room. We can't outrun them. Our only chance is to outsmart them. But to do that, we need both human improvisation and alien precision. We'll need everyone working together like never before. Kareth straightened. Then we must combine our knowledge fully. No walls between us. Ethan glanced at him, a small smile tugging at his lips. Guess that means we're officially stuck with each other. Preparing for the storm, the next days were a blur of work. Ethan and Kareth practically lived in the engine bay, surrounded by wires, tools, and half-broken parts. Kareth drew complex schematics for a trap that might mislead the enemy sensors. Ethan looked at the drawings, scratched his head, and then laughed. It's brilliant, but it won't work with these old circuits. Unless... He grabbed a coil of outdated cabling. We patch it together like this. Ugly, but it'll hold. Kareth raised a brow ridge. Crude, yet effective. You humans see function before form. And you aliens, Ethan countered with a grin, see the form before function, which means together we actually get it right. Their banter became the rhythm of the ship. Other crew members began to notice the strange partnership. Some whispered, some shook their heads in disbelief. But as systems slowly came back online, no one could deny the results. The second battle, when the Vrax's ships returned, the Taralis was ready. The enemy fleet dropped from hyperspace, their weapons glowing like burning suns. The Taralis seemed small, fragile compared to the armada facing it. Ethan stood on the deck beside Kareth, tools strapped to his belt, heart pounding in his chest. He muttered under his breath, "Well, here we go again." The first volley came. Energy beams streaked across space, hammering the shields. The Taralis shook violently, but this time systems held steady. "Activate the decoy," Kareth said calmly. Ethan slammed a button. A cluster of false signals burst from the ship, scattering across the void. Enemy fire chased them, striking empty space. They're confused. Ethan shouted, "It's working!" But the Vraxes weren't fools. Within minutes they adjusted, closing in. More fire struck the hull, ripping through armor. The ship groaned like a wounded beast. "Shields at 40%, someone called. The captain's voice thundered, "Hold the line. Trust the plan." The gamble Kareth leaned close to Ethan. "The next phase requires someone to enter the core chamber and reroute power manually." Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'll go." Kareth grabbed his arm. "It is too dangerous." "Radiation levels are beyond tolerance," Ethan smirked. "Lucky for us, I'm stubborn. Besides, who else knows those cables like I do?" Kareth's grip tightened. For a moment, his alien composure cracked. "If you fail, this ship is lost," Ethan met his eyes. "Then I won't fail." Without another word, he sprinted toward the core, into the core. The chamber blazed with light and heat. Radiation alarms wailed. Ethan pulled his visor down and moved fast, sweat pouring down his back. Sparks flew as he yanked open a panel, revealing a maze of glowing conduits. His hands moved instinctively, cutting, splicing, rerouting, turning Kareth's elegant theory into a rough, working reality. Over comms, Kareth's voice guided him. "Red conduit left side, connected to the secondary node. On it," Ethan shouted, forcing the pieces together. Another explosion shook the ship. The floor trembled beneath him. "We're out of time, Kareth." "Finish it, Ethan." With one last surge of effort, Ethan slammed the final cable into place. Energy roared through the core. Lights blazed brighter than ever before. The Taralis unleashed a shockwave of power, flooding the battlefield with blinding energy. Enemy sensors scrambled, their ships spinning in confusion. "Victory! Now, fire everything," the captain commanded. The Taralis released its hidden weapon, a pulse cannon rigged from spare parts and human-alien cooperation. The blast ripped through the nearest Vrax's ship, tearing it apart. The rest of the enemy fleet hesitated, then retreated into hyperspace, leaving the battered but living Taralis drifting in silence. Cheers erupted across the deck. Exhausted faces lit with joy. They had survived. In the engine bay, Ethan stumbled out of the core chamber, coughing but alive. Kareth rushed forward, catching him before he collapsed. You did it," Kareth said softly. Ethan grinned weakly. "Told you I don't fail easy." Recognition and respect. Later, as repairs began again, the captain addressed the crew. "Today we stood against a fleet stronger than us. We should have been destroyed. But we endured because two minds, one human, one alien, found strength in each other. This is the human factor, the ability to fight, to adapt, to trust beyond boundaries." The crew cheered, many glancing at Ethan and Kareth with new respect. Ethan scratched his neck, embarrassed. "Guess we made history, huh?" Kareth looked at him, expression softer than ever before. "Not history, future. Epilogue." That night, back in their shared quarters, silence filled the room once again. But it was no longer the silence of strangers or even the quiet of survivors. It was the peace of comrades who had faced death and forged something unbreakable. Ethan lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. "So what now?" Kareth folded his hands, voice calm. "Now we rebuild, we prepare, and we remember what was proven here, that human courage and alien logic together can stand against any storm." Ethan closed his eyes, smiling. Yeah, together. Outside the viewport, the stars shone brighter than ever, and the Taralis sailed on, scarred but unbroken. Its crew carried hope, and at its heart a mechanic and an engineer who had shown the galaxy that unity could change everything. And somewhere, in the vast dark, the Viraxis Dominion would remember the day they were stopped, not by an armada, but by the human factor.